Sonic Freeriders is weird.
Guys, honestly, Sonic Freeriders, it's not that bad.
It's just a game that it's really difficult to get an opinion on it. Because as you're playing, sometimes I'll think, hey, this is a pretty solid title. I like this game, I'm enjoying myself, I'm having fun. And yet other times, I absolutely hate it, and I am insanely frustrated. Because sometimes your inputs just won't register. Then there's the kind of absurd difficulty spikes at the end of almost every story. And just a lack of security when playing. Like, when I don't have a controller, I don't really know exactly what I'm meant to do. Like, for example, when I come up on a trick ramp, I crouch down to charge the jump and then jump in the air at the edge of the ramp. Simple stuff, but I don't know exactly what pose the Kinect is looking for. And yeah, there's this little stickman guy that comes on screen to show you how to perform the actions, but sometimes he's just kind of wrong on how to perform the actions. Like in the final level of this game, Final Factory, there's this skydiving section, but I have no idea. Can you move here? Can you? I have no idea. The game doesn't tell me what I'm meant to do. There's certain times where, I've tried to lean forward and, dive into it, but it's not like I can go faster, but I don't know. Is there something I can do here? I don't know, but it's like I hit these objects and it appears as if I'm meant to dodge them, but I don't think there is a way to dodge, but maybe there is. That's the thing, I don't know. So that's definitely a big problem with this game. There's just so much I don't know to it. So that's just talking about the controls conceptually. Let's get more into the gameplay specifically. So the gameplay, I think, is pretty darn good. I like a lot of the mechanics introduced in this game. The direction switching idea is so sick. Not only can you select from a plethora of gears that give your character a fun upgrade, you can also just give Sonic a flight ability and a rail grinding ability, and the way you switch between these abilities is just switching the direction you're facing. I just love this mechanic because it takes advantage of the fact that you're on a Kinect. A lot of times throughout this game, you'll just say, well, I wish I could just play this on a controller. And it feels like the Kinect is a disadvantage, but in this case, it feels like a mechanic that was made for the Kinect, and it makes sense. You just switch directions. It's very intuitive, and it's very responsive, actually. It's one of the few mechanics that I didn't have bug out on me. All I have to do is jump and do a little spin. That's the most consistent thing I can do, which is just like I'm talking about. Like, the game doesn't tell you that doing a jump is more consistent. Now, of course, I did just start trying to do it that way because I looked at the animation and saw the character jump, so I'm like, well, I'll start jumping too, and that's where it came from. So it wasn't like it was impossible to figure out that that was the better way, but still, I just didn't know that. I just kind of had to guess.
Not that the rest of the Riders series is all too great about that either.
Another mechanic this game introduces is the kick dash, which is basically just a boost, but they did make it very intuitive for the Kinect. The way you do it is that you put out your foot and do a nice kick, and your character gets a big speed boost. And it works the exact same way a boost does in Riders 1. It takes some of your air meter, and that's about it. And it actually makes the opening to races really interesting, because in the other Riders games, you'll notice that you'll have to hold backwards and then start holding forward at the perfect moment to get that perfect start. But in this game, you're always moving forward. So the solution is that you have to perform the kick dash at the perfect time to get just enough speed to cross the start line right as it hits 0. It's the same idea, but they made it work for the Kinect. And so I have to give them a lot of props. They definitely took a lot of measures to make this game make sense for the Kinect as a platform. And the last new mechanic in this game is pretty darn cool. I don't know what you call it, but basically you stick your hands out either to each side or above your head, and you get to collect rings in these little automated sections. And it's definitely quite smart to use this mechanic simply due to the fact that, well, these sections are straightaways and you don't want to be bumping into the walls. And since this mechanic, locks your position, it automates all of that. You don't have to worry about steering for a couple seconds. It's a nice mechanic in its simplest form like this, but we'll get back to that because it's got some cool implications later down the line. And so with the main new mechanics of this game out of the way, I do want to talk about people's big problem with this game, the turning. And honestly, it's not that bad. Don't get me wrong, I definitely had a lot of moments where I just straight up couldn't steer. But I found out that most of that was just on how I had my Kinect set up, and there was definitely ways to make my experience more enjoyable. I do want to give a quick shout out to this video that was extremely helpful in getting myself set up. It goes over everything you need to know to get your Kinect in a good place so that you'll actually have a better experience. So if you do ever plan on playing this game, please go check that out before doing so. And so honestly, with this guide in mind, turning was pretty solid. Another big mechanic is the trick system. Now this system is quite automated like zero gravity, but since you're the one who's controlling the character very literally, I am so glad they didn't try to make this more complicated. The way you do it is that you crouch down to charge a jump and then jump into the air to jump. It seems pretty simple, but it is quite hard to get the hang of. I found that the best technique to doing a trick is to just always jump earlier than you think you should. Like, start trying to jump almost as soon as you hit the ramp. I'm not sure if it's just that I jump slow, I don't know if it's the Kinect is slow, I don't know if it's my TV is slow, or maybe it's a combination of all three, but I found if I start to jump right at the beginning of the ramp, I usually get the input timing pretty darn good. And now, after beating the game, I can pretty consistently get an S rank. Now, that's S ranks. How about the X ranks in this game? Honestly, I can't really give my thoughts on them because I have only gotten an X rank 3 times in the entire game. That's it. And honestly, I have no idea how I pulled them off, which goes back to what I was saying where it's like, I don't really know what I did. I know that in the tutorial for the game, it tells you to switch directions right as you jump, but I don't know, I can't seem to get an X rank by doing this. I don't know if it's my jump timing, there's just so many factors involved. That's what makes this game so difficult to talk about. It's just that if there's a problem with the gameplay, how can I really call it a problem? I don't know where that problem stems from. Is it me? Is it the Kinect? Is it the game? Or is it some other factor entirely? And that's the thing, I have no idea. So before I wrap up my thoughts on the gameplay, I want to talk about a couple cool things I found in these stages. First off, Dolphin Resort is awesome. This is a really solid opening track. It feels just complex enough that you can get a lot of replay value out of it, but it's still plenty simple so that it's still a good first level. Rocky Ridge is such a good level too. I just love the aesthetic here, and honestly, I know the music is super corny, but that's why I like it. Instead of trying to be all cool or whatever, it just completely goes all in on the corny factor, and it's just kind of cool. Frozen Forest is another great level. I'm definitely a really big fan of this boat section at the end of the level.
Epic transition.
Metropolis Speedway. This level is kinda iffy for me. I really, once again, love the cheesy music and that they just went all the way with it and didn't try to hold back from being cringe or whatever. So I do like that about it. The soundtrack is very good, but I don't know, I'm not a very big fan of the track design here. It just feels a little overcomplicated. Then there's Magma Rift. I like this one a solid bit. There aren't really that many paths to take in this level, so it's not very dense, and it's one of the more linear levels, but I still am quite the fan of it. I do not like the placement of some of these hazards, like it's almost impossible to not hit this one geyser. Forgotten Tomb. This one is really good, and it actually utilizes a mechanic that I didn't learn how to use until the very end of the game, so we'll come back to that. But apart from that, I really like the visuals here. This cool shot where you get launched into the air is pretty sick. Final Factory. Easily the best level in the game. It has a lot of depth to it, and there are tons of paths to take, but it doesn't have that overcomplicated feeling that Metropolis Speedway will have at times. And this level, apart from being really well designed, adds a awesome gimmick, and actually takes advantage of one of the new mechanics added in this game, like I mentioned earlier. The way it works is that you'll come across these sections where you would normally stick out your hand to collect rings, and you'll notice that at the end of them there's this nice little green pole, and when your character gets close to it, you actually grab onto it and manage your way around a corner much faster. Not only is it satisfying, it saves you a ton of time, but it's not just for the ones where you hold out your hands to the side. These poles can actually be used with your hands in the air. Like, look at this. This is so sick. This is just a great way of using the mechanics added in this game, which is what makes me love this level so much. It just feels like it takes the most advantage of everything added in this game to just make the ultimate Free Riders level. And frankly, I just think it's all quite well designed. So Final Factory is definitely the most well designed, and like I was mentioning earlier, the pole mechanic is also featured in Forgotten Tomb, although I had no idea how to do it, and I can't record footage right now. Everything hurts. So the last thing I want to talk about for the gameplay is the way the story mode functions gameplay-wise. So in the previous two Riders games, the way the story mode works is that, well, you complete races. Pretty darn simple stuff, but this game has a mission structure, where instead of race to the finish in 3 laps, you now have collect a certain amount of rings as Vector, or grind on 5 grind rails as Shadow. And honestly, while these are distractions from the main racing, I don't mind them at all, even if they are the majority of the story mode. My big problem actually comes in with the main races, because they always slide one big race at the end of each story, where you're required to get first place in 3 laps. Which doesn't sound bad, but these races for 3 laps take like 6 minutes. These courses are nothing to laugh at. They have quite the length to them. And when you're playing a Connect game where you're like already tired out from the rest of the story, having to play a grueling race for 6 minutes straight where you have to get first, it gets pretty old quick. So honestly, a big tip of advice I can give is to just take breaks. The Xbox notification wasn't kidding when they tell you, if you're feeling tired or sore, take a break. Because genuinely, if you just take a break for a couple minutes and, chill out for a little, you can then get back in the game and actually lock in and get some good performance instead of just making yourself angry by continually losing. So yeah, honestly, this is a game that you probably shouldn't try and beat in one go, which is kind of what I tried. I split it up over 2 days, but I still was trying to get big portions of this game in, when truthfully I would recommend just doing one story at a time and just taking your time at it. So overall, the gameplay of this game is pretty good. I think its only downfalls is just the Kinect sensor. I think most of the actions are pretty intuitive and make sense, while I do think there should have been more guidance on how to do them. Not that the game telling you what you're meant to do is a common thing in the Riders series. In fact, I guess they were just going with the flow like the other games and proceeding to not tell you vital information. I will say the tutorial in this game is the best out of all the games. So on to the story. I have no idea what happens. I'm going to be so honest with you. I skipped all of the cutscenes. I watched the first 2 cutscenes in this game and I already figured out everything I needed to know.
I'm looking forward to seeing the sights as I tear through such a beautiful town.
Same simple plot as Riders 1, Grand Prix, Eggman offer cash money, and that's about it. Honestly, watching the cutscenes would have probably been a good break, which is why I probably wouldn't have, gotten so flippin' angry at certain points, and honestly, I just hate seeing that they did this stupid PNG garbage because, man, this game looks pretty darn good. Now yeah, as a 2010 game, it's not exactly the greatest, but it's still a really solid looking game. And so seeing 3D animated cutscenes in this game would have just been a joy. Not that they had, the budget to do that, but whatever. And so I guess if you want to know what happens in this game, because, I sure don't, I don't know, look it up. I don't flippin' know. And so, like my other 2 Riders reviews, I gotta talk about the music in this game. And boy, when you're playing these levels, you're gonna be listening to some pretty decent music. Yeah, it's not quite peak this time. And it's kind of weird, because this game's soundtrack has some really high highs. Because Free, Rocky Ridge, and Metropolis Speedway are all bangers. Even if Rocky Ridge and Metropolis Speedway are super cheesy, I mentioned earlier that's why I love them. But the rest of the songs in this game are just kind of alright. Most of these tracks really aren't that special. I just find the 2 funny, cheesy ones kind of funny. And so yeah, that about wraps everything up for this video. Free Riders it's quite the video game. But even though the Kinect is something else and it doesn't respond half the time, I think there's a good game lying under that shell. And I think that the gameplay is frankly quite fun at times, but it can also be insanely infuriating. And really, after giving it a good bit of thought, I really think this game is a 4 out of 10. It's not absolutely abysmal, but it's held back by so much. And even though I have a big soft spot for this game, this is definitely just another Sonic game that had a lot of potential in my opinion. And so, to sum everything up, everything hurts.